welcome to today's episode of the Virtuous Woman Show. My name is Sheila Juma and we're so delighted to be hosting you this wonderful Sunday evening. We hope you've had a great evening, a great Sunday, a great week from wherever you're watching us from. Thank you so much for always tuning in if you've always been a member of our show. And if it's your first time watching, Karibu Sana. This is a show where we talk about women and our issues and how we can deal with them. We inspire and we seek to bless and educate with each show. So I pray that this particular show will be a blessing to you, and I know indeed that it will, as we have a very interesting show lined up for you. Before we start, we'd like to thank Kingdom Point Apartments here in Nakuru for having us shoot our show here today, and we are just wanting to let you know if you're looking for a place to stay, if you're looking for an apartment, this is a home of excellence, so you'd like to check it out. If you're watching us online, go ahead, share this broadcast with someone. Don't get blessed alone. Have someone come tune in and let us have an amazing time together this evening. Today, we are talking about psychological issues. Everybody has a life that they're going through and a life that they're walking, a journey that they are taking. And through this journey, you can find very many people who may be distraught, may be finding themselves in a sudden change, a sudden challenge, and many people most of the time don't know what to do. So that's what we're handling today. And with us on set we have Dr. Lydia. Karibu Sana.
Thank you.
Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Dr. Lydia Waiya. I am a psychologist handling many issues in psychology. I am a lecturer at the university. I teach at Laikipia University. I'm a teacher of psychology, educational psychology, general psychology, sports psychology, and many other issues that are related to psychology. For a long time, I've been there. I'm also a mother of grown-up children. I am also a wife, and I deal with people. Yes, greatly. I'm also an elder in my church. I attend sit-in churches, and I thank God for what He has done in my life and the far He has brought me. Amen. As a person.
Amen.
Yes.
Beautiful. You mentioned psychology, and you mentioned very many types of psychology: educational psychology, sports psychology. So maybe you can tell us what exactly is psychology, maybe for people who don't know, and then what is the difference between like regular, because to me psychology is just, you know, help me. I come, I talk to you, you help me.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, psychology is actually the study of human behavior. Okay. Issues to do with how people behave and the motivation behind their behavior. Yeah, and it is behavior is predictable. If you look at somebody's, or if you study how a person behaves, you can be able to predict what they will do next. It is dictated by the way we think, because the way you construe an issue, it will dictate on the action you will take. Yeah. And that's why when different people encounter different issues in life, you realize that their behavior is very different. There is this person who will get overwhelmed because of an issue, and the next thing they are thinking of how hopeless they are, depression sets in, and so on. Another person will be challenged by the same issue, and they will take a very positive action towards their growth, towards looking beyond that. They concentrate on their healing to get out of the situation. Yeah. So the mind dictates so many things, and like the Bible says, as a man thinks, so is he. Yeah. Yeah. So that dictates your action, and that's why even at such a time you realize that people are and there are people who have grown so much in spite of what is happening right now in the country economically,
because
and so on.
Because of the mindset.
Yes.
All right.
Others are already taking away their lives, and they are blaming the government, they are blaming their partners, they are blaming every other thing they can find to do. Yeah, so the mind dictates very many
So
things.
what is now educational, let's say educational psychology?
Educational psychology is all things that are related to learning, education, acquiring knowledge, and so on. how do you get that information? How do you learn, you know, and what the impact it has in your life and so on. Yeah.
All right. So as we start,
acquisition of knowledge.
Okay. So as we start, I just want I want to ask you this question: how big of an influence is someone's upbringing in the way they view life?
Somebody's foundation is very important.
Yeah.
And a child actually picks the behavior and things from the society. The immediate environment of a child is very important. That's why you'll find that if a child is brought up in, say, a violent home, they know that the way you sort out things is through violence. Yeah. If a child is brought up in the church, and the Bible puts it very well, train a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. When a child is growing up, a child picks all what they do from that. That is what dictates how they think and so on. Yeah. So when a child grows up in the church, you realize their behavior is so different. Because in most cases, they look at what the Bible says because that's what they are taught when they are sorting out issues, when they are thinking about their lives and so on. Background is very important. It's
very important.
Very, very important. What you expose your child to is very important, so because it will dictate how they will behave when they are old.
So even children are psychological beings.
Every behavior of a human being, a child is a human being.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. And you can be able to shape even the way that child grows up and thinks. Yes.
So now, as people are going through life, how can one recognize and deal with issues that are beyond them? You know, I've had, I don't know if I agree completely with this statement, but I've had it being said that if you can't control something, then leave it be. Like, only handle things that are within your control. If it's beyond your control, you know, just leave it be. Now, when you go through life, you'll find yourself sometimes in a situation where, this is something new, this is a very sudden change, a very sudden challenge that has just come. How does a person deal with such a thing?
Change is inevitable in life. Yeah. And all of us go through change. From the time we were born, every day there is something new happening. And you can't do anything about change. And you should be prepared for change. Okay. Unfortunately, we are not. We look at things from a certain expectation, a certain perspective, that things have to be good in most cases, so that when things don't go the way you do, they challenge you, all of us. And most of the people will dwell so much on the negative than on how to look at that issue from the other dimension of positivity. What can I be able to do? If something overwhelms me, what am I supposed to do? I am sure there are people in every situation, there are people who know better than we do. Yeah. And if you know that, you'll seek counsel. Yeah. Because you are in a better position making an informed decision than actually just looking at something and giving up. Yeah. All of us have a flip side of life. Things can be in a certain dimension, but there is also the flip side of that issue, or where you are in life. Most people do not ask themselves, supposing this happens, or what would happen if this happens? The other side. We've seen so many people go to school, and most of us, especially the older generation, we were taught that once you go to school, you have to get a job. Right now, things have changed. The people who are at the university now, at least now mentalities are changing. But earlier on, everybody expected to go to the university, and after that you get a job. Look at the many young people who are frustrated at home. Yet there are others who are very innovative, and they've come up with ways of changing their lives. They've come up with creativity and innovations that are actually growing so much, especially in IT and other areas. When you ask yourself what can happen, or even you are with people, and we know that death is inevitable, and a person passes away, and you depended so much on that person, you realize to so many people, life comes to an end. Yet there is a life beyond that. When the inevitable happens, the first thing you do is to go through it, through grief, because it is a loss. But after that, you're supposed to accept it. Once you accept, you will look at life the way it is. Of course, it takes a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of... it is not easy to go through that situation. But people have gone through harder things and they've been able to go through them. Now, so if you realize you have a problem, seek professional help.
All right.
And there are people who can help you.
Now, preparing for change.
Yes.
You've mentioned having a contingency plan. That's how I've viewed it. Making sure that you ask yourself, if this doesn't work, what would I do? If things go this other way, what would happen? Because you are an elder in the church. Would you say that maybe that's not faith? Maybe that is not putting your trust in God. Is it okay to make a contingency plan, have a plan B, have your mind ready for change, or if anything happens, or go the way some people may think, oh, no, this is it, God has a plan for me, this is how we are going, this is life. What would you say to that?
Let me correct that.
Yeah.
That I did not say that you have a contingency plan. I mean plan. I said it is always good to know that things can change.
Yeah.
At the back of your mind, know that things can change.
Okay.
That whatever there is, things can change. Faith is very important.
Yeah.
And the Bible puts it very clearly that without faith we cannot please God.
True.
I believe that God helps all of us to be able to live the way we do, and even to be able to tackle the things that we cannot be able to do. And that's why He is there.
Yeah.
When things happen that we do not expect, of course we look unto God.
Yeah.
And we know that with faith, trusting God, in prayer, things can turn around. That is faith. And even when they are turning around, you don't just sit and wait for them to happen. God will use you to be able to reach where you are going in whichever way. So that we are not saying that you prepare, because there is very little that man can do without God.
True.
Actually, there is nothing that man can do without God. And when we put our faith in God, we trust that He directs us. The Bible says that He will order. The steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. That talks about the future. That talks about going to where you don't know and all that. But unfortunately, sometimes we forget when change comes and you're looking like God has already taken a break off your life. So you don't make a plan. You trust in God, but know that at the back of your mind, know that it can happen. And when it happens, you trust in God, just the same way you trust God even when things are going right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Now, there are people who would face those sudden changes and challenges, and like you said, not everybody knows about counseling. Not everybody knows about these things. You know, some people don't know how to deal with it, and so they, of course, plunge into depression. They plunge into anxiety and all these things, and even people go ahead to commit suicide, unfortunately. To someone who is already in that position, what do you do? Because now you're already in such a horrible mental state. What, of course, you mentioned going to see a counselor, but what other things can you do to help yourself get out of that, even when the challenge has already occurred?
When the challenge comes, it is actually a process. It starts from somewhere. And you realize that it is something that overwhelms you. You don't see your way forward, and that is what leads now to depression. When you're already in distress and you are feeling hopeless, you're already getting into a deep psychological state that you cannot be able to get yourself out of. In most cases, you are with people around, if you are lucky, and I would say that it is very important to
have people.
Invest in social capital.
Okay.
Get people around you. Get involved with other people in what goes on in their lives, even as they get involved in what goes on in your life. But in most cases, if you are just on your own and you're putting it inside and you're not able to tell somebody, it is very unfortunate, because it will lead you to very extreme
when you're left with your own thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. And I believe that everybody, all of us are social beings. In one way or another, we interact. You talked about foundation. Everybody is born in a family somewhere, whether it's a single parent or some family, whether it is you have both parents and your siblings and so on. We are born somewhere. Yeah. And that's why foundation is very, very important. If you learn to be on your own and you are never taught or you never learned to socialize with other people, definitely it will affect you. If you're not in a church setup and you're just alone and you believe in being alone and all that, definitely it will have a harder toll on you than if you interact with people and so on. And as people socialize, whether it is in school, whether it is in colleges, whether it is in church, whether it is wherever, you know that they are people. Yeah. But once you decide to open up to somebody, get somebody, even a friend, open up to your pastor, open up to your teacher if you're in a school setup, open up to the pastors in church or just somebody, because somebody will tell you that something that will be able at least to minister to your life. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I love that, because opening up is quite helpful, but what can you tell us maybe what are the dangers of not opening up? Because I'm an introvert, and so the Lord has helped me over the years to gain social capital and all that. But I know there are people who are introverted to the point where, especially men, to the point where things happen, you keep them to yourself. You know, masculinity, mwanaume ni kukaza, mwanaume si kulia, you know, and so you bottle up all these things in your heart, in your mind, and that ends up affecting you. So what are the dangers of never opening up and just thinking tunakaa macho? Yeah.
The moment you don't open up, the whole thing actually remains in you and continues to grow in you. Eventually it will blow you up. Yeah. Because it's like pressure. When you put so much pressure in a ball, what happens?
It bursts.
It bursts. And you'll eventually end up bursting. There is something that we call self-awareness. When you know that you have a problem, a wise person would get out there and be able to at least share with somebody. Know yourself. Know that this is my weak point. If you know you have a weakness somewhere, can you go and get help? Address it, whether with your spouse, whether with people you socialize with, and so on. One of the problems that we have, and especially with the Africans, it is the way we were socialized and the way we were culturalized. You realize that people are socialized in a way that you don't open up to anybody, especially men. You tell them not to cry, and they are dying inside. And even when they try to say something, you're telling them that is not manly. What happens? By the end of the day, you're ending up in depression. There are so many people who have depression right now, because some of them lost jobs. Some they cannot share with anybody. They never learned to share. They are not even understood, because they don't even have that language of sharing with somebody, because that is what they were told to do. But eventually they end up with a lot of problems and so on. I would encourage every man, look for somebody you can share with, wherever you are. And I believe I'm talking to people who have friends somewhere, or people they can associate with, whether at church, whether at work, and so on. And I like it that in schools right now, you realize that people are being given what we call social skills, so that you know how to tackle social issues and also on interpersonal relationships, intrapersonal, how do you deal with yourself, and so on. It is good for all of us to get out there and be able to share what is in us, so that at least you can be able to get help somewhere. And you are able to learn even from others who have gone through that situation. It would help us.
Yeah. Yes. I really like what you said about self-awareness. Being able to tell, this is not me. Something is bothering me, and I'm not in a good place, and therefore I need to seek help. That, I think, is something that is lacking in a lot of people, who they just think maybe it's normal maybe it's just, I mean, you know, people have learned to brush things off, and they're not really self-aware of themselves. So I think that's really important. Moving on, let's talk about a marriage setup where you see your spouse is not themselves. What kind of support should a husband or a wife give to their partner when they start to notice things that maybe are not their usual self? What kind of support should that person give?
When people get into marriage, they start as friends with a very high level of love.
Yeah.
And by that time, they start sharing, or they start with sharing so many things. Probably the first question is to ask, what happened that after a certain, or at a certain point in your marriage, you cannot be able to share what is within you with the other person? Is it because of trust? Is it because of self-confidence? Because sometimes somebody can be having a problem of self-confidence. Is it because of insecurity? Is it because of what is it? What happened? At what point did you stop sharing? And that is where you go back. And that tells you there is a problem in this marriage. And especially in a Christian setup, it tells you that you need help, both of you, before even you start helping your partner, because you could be out trying to help this person, but the person does not want to be helped because of one reason or another. And that is why I would really encourage people to keep on attending marriage seminars, and they are there in almost every other church, so that people can be able to be helped how to relate in a healthy way. That way you'll be able to reach out to your partner. That way you'll be able to, when you notice there is an issue, you don't even wait to be asked what it is. You'll be able to share it.
Just say
to share it out, and you're able to help each other. You're able to actually identify when it is beyond you and you need the help of somebody else. Yes.
Amazing. Because I feel like there's very many marriages where people are suffering inside by themselves. You feel maybe your partner maybe wouldn't understand, and it probably boils down to, like you said, a point in their marriage where something happened and maybe trust was lost. Maybe you felt like this maybe is too big for this person to also handle. So yeah, making sure that you go through seminars, counseling. Some people who have accountability partners, what is it called? The people who are couples, accountability couples, I think are also very important, right? In a marriage. Amazing.
And even those who are not in church, because there are also people listening to this. It is quite important to also understand yourself, I mean your strengths, and also be able to know your partner well. So that when there is an issue with that person, because this person, you live with this person every day. We have heard of so many cases where people are actually violent towards one another. And in most cases, the person that is blamed most is the person closest if something goes wrong. You think that your partner is the one who caused all this to happen. Why didn't they do something? And things like that. It is important you understand who you are.
Absolutely.
And then be able to study this other person and see the point at which he or she needs help. And identify the person probably who is closest to them, and let them talk to them. If you're not able to do it, because probably you may not be, not be in church, both of you. You may not even have wedded in church. You may have gotten married through whichever way. But look for people who can be able to intervene in your case. Because if you leave it just like that, when it blows off, it will blow you off. Yes.
True. Lastly, time is moving very fast. People who have gone through trauma, let's say maybe even in your teenage years, in your younger years, and now you're an adult, and without even your knowledge, it is affecting you. It's affecting the way you behave. It's affecting the way you think. So how do you deal with past traumas that are now affecting the way you live your everyday life?
Trauma is a disease. I can call it. It is a sickness. And trauma comes with very many things. Trauma can cause helplessness. Trauma can lead to depression. Trauma affects a person in such a way that it interferes even with the way you think. And if it is not addressed, it can lead to other things.
Yeah.
It may start when it is psychological, but it may end up being a psychiatric issue.
Wow.
And that is why you need to seek help as early as possible. A person with the trauma needs to surround himself, although sometimes they may not be able to do that because they don't know where to get help. They need a lot of understanding. And if you realize that a person you are relating with has gone through trauma, be very close to that person, be very patient to that person, allow that person to share out what is in them.
Yeah.
Because, like I've already said, it starts as a psychological issue, but ends up as a psychiatric issue.
Let me ask you a question. What causes a psychological issue to go to that extreme that it now becomes a psychiatric issue?
One, it affects the mind. And in most cases, in a situation of helplessness, you realize that you allow your mind to just be drifted to other things.
Wow. So it physically now affects your mind.
Exactly. It is just like a wound.
Yeah.
What happens when you leave a wound unattended? The situation gets deteriorating. And eventually, you'll have probably a wound that started on the finger. You end up with an arm being amputated. Wow. So that when you realize you've gone through trauma, you've not been able to handle it. I talked about sharing with somebody, interpersonal relationship, and getting somebody at least to share with. And that person, if the person doesn't help you, at least a person will tell you one or two things or direct you to another person who can be able to help you.
Yeah.
I talked about self-awareness. It is very, very important to look at yourself and be able to know that actually you can only go so far.
Yeah.
Beyond that, you're not able to do it on your own. And that is where help comes in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, very briefly.
But trauma is an illness.
It is.
And it needs to be addressed. Because if it is left just like that, you realize that actually it takes you very far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very briefly, maybe just look at that camera and give us your parting shot.
Let me say this. We have a life to live. And all of us are interested in our lives. We've talked about the mind, and we have said that the mind dictates everything we do. Our thoughts dictate everything we do. And as much as possible, it is important to take care of what we think, how we think about it, and to look at the things that we go through in life and decide where we want to be. Because there are people who can help us. We have counselors who can be able to help us. We have psychologists who can be able to help us. We have our pastors who can be able to help us spiritually, and prayer also. And when we get to a point where we are overwhelmed by anything, we need to seek professional help. We need to seek spiritual intervention. And I believe that we can never go wrong when we seek help from those people who can be able to help us. Don't sit just there. Change is inevitable, and it happens, both positive change and negative change. But let's know that change is inevitable. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming and for educating us and for speaking with us. We're really grateful.
Yes.
We hope you've had a great, informative session just as I have. I hope to see you same time, same place next week. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.